Just recently, I went to Grapevine, Texas during the holidays, and it is really enchanting. Just as you can see all these photographs right here. And right near these enchanting buildings downtown are grain elevators, and I sketched it just like this one above me here. And check out that video. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to use the Texas sunset on the back of a grain elevator and allowing it to be kind of silhouette out with this Texas sunset in the background. And that's what we're going to do in this video. So this step one, I'm just blocking it out with some pins just to kind of get an idea how it's going to set on the paper. This is exactly the same video I used when I was doing that other grain elevator sketch. I just included it here so you can kind of get an idea how I am able to use those pins to make a composition on a paper. After doing it the first time, I really didn't have to use a pen the second time. And then I got some Tombows, I'll keep on saying Tombow pens that are water-based pens, and I started blocking out where all these silos or grain elevators are going to be placed. Kind of in my mind, already knowing from the first time I sketched it, which then I used before that, the layout with those pens, as you can see. And as I mentioned before, I really like the Tombow pens because to block it out, particularly because they are water-based, and if there are any lines I just don't like at all, I'll wash it away during the watercoloring stage. And here I'm actually just showing just an overall outline. I don't go into detail. I'm just showing the box outlines of various silos or maybe some major elements, maybe showing kind of where some of the foliage might be, and maybe even showing some of the railroad tracks to kind of get a sense of perspective about how things are going. I'm also intentionally kind of skewing this image just slightly in order to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. And by the way, I stole that kind of technique from Ian Finley. He's actually my mentor, virtual mentor. And I'll leave a link down below for some awesome lessons that he offers. They really helped me, and I'd really recommend you checking those out too. And then the step three, I got my pen and ink out. Now these are not water-based. These, once they're on the paper, they're going to stay. And I'm still going over the overall box of this composition, but then I'm going to put a little bit more detail to show kind of where some of these elements are going to place, just like this here, like I'm showing with the ridges and those little joints of those silos. And then I'm also able to kind of define a little bit more of the curvature of these silos, and keeping in mind really the perspective and letting it get kind of just diminish quite a bit on the far left side of the screen. Doggone, my head is kind of getting in the way, but what I'm doing there is I'm putting just the top knot on there. And by the way, that's not really a top knot. There's a building behind these silos, and it kind of looks like it's part of the silo, but it's a separate building. But it's kind of fun to make it kind of look like the mast head over these grain elevators. And I'm just drawing the just different details and drawing the guardrails on top. And I mentioned a little bit about putting the guardrails on top and using those as a sense of scale on the other videos. And again, I encourage you to go out and look at that video too after you're seeing this video. And here I'm drawing the railroad tracks. And those railroad tracks really served a great purpose because it also gives a sense of scale, gives a sense of perspective, and it also adds kind of like a border at the bottom of this sketch. And I tend to make little squiggly lines on both sides of buildings, or at least one side, but in this case both sides, and it kind of bookends the sketch, and it allows for it to kind of highlight what's in the middle. And as I mentioned on the other video, oftentimes I'll have 3 stratas of these squirrelies, and the foreground's going to be darker, the midground's not so dark, and the background is going to be much lighter, because things seem to be darker when they're closer to you, and they kind of fade away when they go further away. I'm mopping the top parts with water because I'm going to do a wash for this Texas sunset. And the Texas sunset that I'm using as an example was photographed about the same time as the photograph you see on the top left. And now I'm going to put some color on it. The colors started off with a bright yellow right at the horizon, and then it kind of radiates up with reds and orange. I used to live in Lubbock, Texas. That's where I studied architecture at Texas Tech University. And I saw so many beautiful sunsets there in West Texas. That's one of the things that they really have something going for them, is the sunset. So I wanted to kind of emulate this here. This is not Lubbock, this is not West Texas, this is North Texas, but still, they're not holding back on beautiful sunsets in North Texas either. And so I just thought it might be fun to kind of see what it does with this image. And the silhouette, you'll see after I let this dry, the silhouette of this silos, or these grain elevators, are not going to be exactly dark black. I have seen some buildings kind of that way, and it really gives a contrast with the sunset even brighter. But I'm using a blue for the shades and shadows, and you'll see that coming in a little bit. The paper I'm using is actually, I probably could have been a little bit thicker. This one's a mixed media, which is a 98 pound. And it started to kind of wrinkle a little bit when I was doing the wash prior to putting the color onto it. And so it's working out okay. I think that using a thicker paper would have been a little bit more friendly when I'm doing some of these wash. But it's still kind of fun. I'm using a wash again on these silos. And again, like I just said, I'm using blue to give a lot of the depth and to show the shadows and trying to indicate how they're actually circular and sphere and give little shades and shadows and various hues. Later on, after I let this dry, I'm going to try to show some of those little rusty streaks that you're seeing in that photograph above me. And that really kind of popped out in my eyes, and it was kind of fun to put that on paper also. Using a rigger, one of the smaller brushes, it almost is like writing with a pen on it, and gives you the ability to show a little bit more detail and pinpoint line work or dots exactly where you want it to go. And it was helpful when I was doing, there's a little bit of rust spots right there. See there? I'm showing little rust spots, and that made it kind of fun. And also splattering onto the paper kind of gives a little bit of interest to that, especially the gravel on the foreground. It kind of helps add a little interest. And it also kind of draws your eye towards a certain focal point that you're spackling in. So it kind of helped out on the drawing, in my opinion. And now we're going to go into another step after I let it dry, and it's using a Tombow or just another felt tip pen, or even going back to the pens that I made the outline with. The outline earlier, in an earlier step, was that I think 0.01, and then I use a 0.03 and 0.05. This one's even fatter than a 0.05 to give more of a definition of the edges. And then I'll use the other side of this pen, which is almost a broad felt tip pen, black, black, black. And it'll, like I said before, it kind of gives a little bit of a muscle on some of these edges that I really want it to pop out. And then I can use the thinner ones to do some hatching. And the hatching can also give an indication of curvatures. It can also give indication of cylinder that's actually turning about once those hatches can get a little closer together as it progresses over to the edge, which kind of indicates that this is a curved material or curved shape. And then the Tombow also is a great way of giving shades and shadows, and the thin side of it allows me to show those little trellises and kind of gives it a little bit of depth or even dimensional qualities to these trellises. But without it, the other side of this same pen is much more broad, and this thinner one allows me to do a little bit more detail shades and shadows than the other side, which was so broad and kind of a broad stroke. Got a little bit ahead of myself and started doing a hatching on there. I was kind of anxious to kind of get on with this sketch. If I were a little bit more patient, I probably wouldn't do the hatching along that trellis. I would have been a little bit more careful, and because there is another trellis kind of near there, and but I'm not really showing that. I'm just kind of giving an indication of something there and letting it kind of vignette out from there. A lot of times we're just kind of showing the emotions and the feelings of a drawing, and we don't really want to have it picture perfect. We don't really want it to, if we did, we'd just go ahead and get a photograph like I did on the top above me. And this is just kind of express kind of a feeling that I had when I was looking at this, these silos, and imagining what it might look like right at sunset with a little bit of the hazy yellow, and how it kind of blends out to more of a reds and oranges above there. And then when I'm darkening the foliage in front of there, it actually kind of helps give even more depth to this picture. And stippling, that's allowing me to kind of give it a little bit more texture too. So there's the end product. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to watch the other video where I showed the plain Jane without the shades and shadows.